Welcome aboard. This is the Admiral's Almanac, your leadership life connection, bringing leaders from all walks of life into yours so you can take charge, improve your leadership, and improve your life. With the wit and wisdom of your host, Rear Admiral Garry Hall.
And thank you for that introduction. I'm your host, Garry Hall. I think we've got a great show lined up for you today. It's all about leadership. Recently, I was talking with an old friend and mentor, Cheryl Seminara, PhD, about leadership, and we're both wrapping up books that we've written, and I think both of them are similar but different. And we decided instead of interviewing each other over the phone, why not do it in the form of a podcast where we can pick each other's brains? So here we go. Let's see where this takes us. Welcome aboard, Dr. Seminara, or can I call you Cheryl?
Just call me Cheryl. And I feel like I should salute.
Oh, no, salutes have already been given, rendered, and returned. So we first met 12 or 13 years ago, maybe 14 years ago. And so you were kind of a mentor to me. So do you remember that?
I remember the one thing I remember, my first impression of you is in your office. And here you are, this admiral with like the outfit, the stars and the flags and all that. And you used to sit in a chair. So everybody faced you, and your chair was under like the Goodfellas poster.
Yeah. The Godfather. It was the Godfather.
Yes.
The Godfather. Well, I humbly state that my helicopter community always considered me the Godfather of the community as a leader and problem solver. So right now you're changing the culture of leadership one leader at a time. That's an amazing thing, but let's get back in the Admiral's Wayback Machine and go back to your 20s or your college years. Where are you from, and what were you doing back in those days?
So I grew up in Boston, and I'm going to start even further back than that. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be the next Barbara Walters. I wanted to do journalism, and I had a sugar cane, and I would practice in my bedroom live from Vietnam, Cheryl Seminara. So I went to Ithaca College, and I majored in communications because that was the route I was taking. And I wanted to do that job for three reasons. One, I got to learn new things as I was researching stories. I got to share that knowledge with other people. And then sometimes journalists actually get to make a difference. So I go down this path. I work in the entertainment business. I manage rock and roll bands. I work in retail. I got in and out of radio a whole bunch of times. And when I was 40, I decided to get a master's degree because, at that point, everybody needs a master's degree. And so the school I was going to required interviews. And in the middle of the interview, they said, no, that's not what you want. You don't want an MBA. I realized everything I'd done in my career had been about helping individuals and businesses grow. And I joke around and say I was 40 when I figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. What I do today with coaching and consulting and even teaching, it's all designed to help individuals and businesses grow. I just picked the wrong path to do it when I was a kid.
So basically where you start off is not necessarily where you're going to end up. Your path has many branches and sequels and tributaries. And so I guess follow your nose.
Yeah. And, find out what you're passionate about and find a way to make money at it.
Yeah. And, I think when I think back to when we met when I was at the National Defense University, when we would have interns in there, they all wanted to graduate or get their master's degree right after college and go into industry business at a senior level. When really, you went in, like I said, retail, radio. So yeah, you might not find out what you're going to do until you're in your 40s.
Yeah, getting a master's degree, it's all about applying what you're learning. And you have to have some basis of experience to be able to start thinking about how do I apply these concepts and then have the ability to apply them. So I advise my because I coach a lot of college kids, and I advise them, don't rush to get a master's unless it's something, a industry or career that requires it, law.
Right.
Take your time, figure out what that is, get that experience, because then that master's degree will mean so much more.
Right. And when I was at National Defense University, our average age of students was around 43. And at that point, when we granted a master's degree, at that point, you could see the education really sticking into their brains and really motivating them, rather than, I think, if you're 21 and going into a master's program, you basically have the brochure and you're checking off the courses one by one and maybe not learning what you'll learn later in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're an educator, mentor, executive coach. I mean, tell us a little bit about, coaching executives. What do you find? What do you have a process?
It's all about helping them understand themselves. So my specialty is cognitive behavioral coaching, and it's looking at focusing on the behaviors. A lot of my clients are veterans that have PTSD. As you know, mental health is something that carries some form of a stigma in the military. So a lot of my clients are looking for something that will help them, but isn't necessarily traditional mental health. So cognitive behavioral coaching helps them identify their triggers and learn to manage them. So that's one part of my client base, those veterans transitioning to civilian life. My other part is I do a lot of academic coaching. So I work with students who are struggling to find the right classes or the right career path, or what do I do with this degree? You graduate from college and you have this piece of paper, and the world is not going to drop what they're doing just for you. And it's helping them figure out how to take that into the real world. With executives, it's usually teaching them how to manage time and emotion. I interviewed somebody today, and he was talking about how somebody came into his office, and he always stops what he's doing when somebody comes into the office. But, somebody came into his office and he sighed, and the person like, oh, I guess it's a bad time, and left.
Right.
So it's helping them understand those different behaviors. And I also coach small businesses, helping them develop their strategic plans, knowing their exit strategy. If you start a business and you don't know the end result, you're probably going to fail.
Right. I want to go back to the PTSD process, and that is, I think it's also the people around them that don't understand. What can we understand better? And here's my point. I've even been a victim of this as a parent to some of my kids' issues, and that is, why don't you just go out and get some fresh air? Why don't you go for a walk? Why don't you drink a cold glass of water? Take a couple of deep breaths and you'll be fine. And later in life, I learned that everything that I just mentioned is the wrong thing to say or do. So what can we do better to understand? We'll call it PTSD, or even if it's minor issues.
It's important to understand, especially with folks that are deployed in the military. While they're away, the dynamics change, the family changes, they learn to do more on their own. And sometimes it's coming back to that change dynamic and figuring out how you fit in. For folks that are exiting the military, you spend months being indoctrinated into the military. And as you leave, you might get a 2-week class, you might get some coaching, whatever it is, but there's not a lot that really prepares you. And so the best advice I give to the family members, because when I'm coaching the individual, I'm also giving guidance to the family. And it's having those discussions, talking about the new normal. How do we as a family start moving forward? There are times for folks that have PTSD that they need that downtime. They need that alone time. And it doesn't mean we abandon them or ignore them. It means we give them that space, but we're also being supportive. And I tell parents, the biggest thing you can do is have family dinner.
Right.
Right. We sit around the table and we do table topics where I think last night the question was, what's your favorite thing to do at recess? And, my best friend, I live in her house with her kids. And she says to me, recess for me is all about drinking a glass of wine. And for me, recess is reading. I love to read. So
Mm-hmm.
it's finding that we've lost a lot of that family dynamic.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we need to, as adults, focus on having that family time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, getting back about return and reunion, the Navy eventually got in tune with return and reunion, coming back to those changed routines. And I remember my very first deployment, which was about 7.5 months long. I came home to my young bride and a brand new baby. And I looked at all the things that were around the house that support a baby. And I went, where did all this stuff come from? And let me take a look at the bills. I know people that are listening to this podcast are going, what a jerk. Well, yes, I was back then. I've evolved. I'm a modern man. But then later, after the Navy provided training, the next deployments I would come home from, I would say things like, I love your new hair color. Have you lost weight? Until the kids that were when they were teenagers, and the yard looks great. And I love having breakfast for dinner. Yeah, you've got to learn to adapt to the new environment and ease yourself back in. But yeah, like I said, I learned sometimes the hard way and sometimes the easy way. But and that's also leadership in the family. With deployments, sometimes the father is the leader and sometimes the mother is a leader, but there always needs to be a leader in the family. So, Cheryl, what's your book about that you're writing?
So there are 5 lessons my father taught me. And I start every semester by posting this as a bonus question for my students. I include it in lectures. I started doing it when I was with FEMA and I was the director of employee development. We would have leader development programs, and I would give these 5 lessons at the beginning of every program. And I was always amazed how people would pick one lesson and come up to me afterwards and say, oh, this is what that lesson mean to me. And so I started taking some of my students' stories, and my dad's getting older. I wanted him to understand how these 5 things have impacted not just me, but so many
Right.
other people. So I started writing, and then I started doing interviews, and now it's blossomed into this beautiful collection of leadership stories, all based on these 5 lessons. And my goal is to give it to my dad on Father's Day.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. So, and what I found some people that said, Gary, where's your book? And I said, well, it's right here in this pen. I just got to squeeze it out. And I had a basic idea. And then as I started writing, it kind of took me on its own journey. So are you going to share with us? How should we share your 5 lessons that you've learned? Instead of rattling them off, should we do one at a time, or how do you want to do
Do one at a time. And what I'd like you to do is tell me what that lesson means to you. And after we've done all 5, I'm going to share with you what they mean to me.
it? Okay. All righty. What's lesson number 1?
Lesson number 1, know what you don't know.
Wow. So, I think, that wasn't Rumsfeld said that, about the unknowns and, how do we know what you or know what you don't know?
Know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's, as Rumsfeld called those, the unknowns. Well, I think, I don't know if so my feeling is, I don't know if it's possible to know what you don't know, but thinking of, what do I not know is going to send you on a path. So, I relate it to being the executive assistant to a very powerful 3-star, then 4-star admiral. And every morning we used to say, in a very different way, what's going to get us today? So what is it that we don't know? And so I don't think, I think that phrase is to tickle your brain to go, okay, I don't know everything. So what is it that I don't know, and how do I find that out? And is that by building a team and listening to their input to understand what I don't know?
All right. Lesson number 2, you own your name.
Okay. And I think that goes to your reputation. The number one trait of executives under pressure is to blame others. And I think I have found in my career that you own your own name, you own what you do. You've got to take accountability uh, of your name, of your brand, of everything you do, and not blame others. And I think that's kind of what you learn at the Naval Academy. You learn the 5 basic response, and one of them is no excuse. And so, knowing, owning your name means owning your actions, your behavior, your responsibilities, and standing tall and accepting accountability.
Awesome. All right. Number 3, when the employee walks in the room, put the pencil down.
Okay. And I think this goes to every aspect of life, especially, I can improve someone's marriage just by using that when your spouse comes in the room, put the pencil down. But let's replace pencil with iPad, iPhone, laptop. And that is in today's world of, high activity and, people driven. The most important thing you can do is to be physically and when you're meant. Boy, okay, Gary, I washed my mouth this morning. I can't do a thing with it. The most important thing to do is when you are physically present, be mentally present. And so as an executive or whatever, putting the pencil down and looking up, taking off your reading glasses and going, yes, what is it? Makes a whole difference. And tell you, I went to my granddaughters in elementary school had like an ice cream social. They had a DJ. They had, face painting, and they had dancing. And I watched all these San Diego moms with their 4-wheel drive little wagons, bringing them out onto the grass, setting up a pop-up tents and sitting in there. And as their children are dancing into the DJ and that, they're looking at the phone going, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. How about liking your children and putting your phone away and dancing with them or cheering with them? And so to me, it means being mentally present when you are physically present. And you'll know that this is happening to you on a Sunday night when you've got a presentation at work on Monday and you're sitting there at the kitchen table or watching TV later. And while everybody is around you, you're thinking about that PowerPoint, not thinking about the family that is with you right there. So being mentally present when you're physically present, that's what it means to me.
That's awesome. Number 4, know who signed the checks.
Okay, so knowing who signs the check, I think that is, who are you responsible to? Who are you reporting to? And that it's not all about you at times. And I think that's part of a little bit of humility of realizing it's not always about you, and you add value, but know who you're adding value and make sure you're going in the right direction. I think to be a good leader, you also have to be a good follower. So you need to know who you're preparing for, who you're working for, what your activities do to strengthen those above you.
All right. Number 5, when the front office calls, acknowledge it right away.
Yeah, well, first of all, I know I used to, when I was a young JO, when they'd go, my buddies would go, hey, Gary, the skipper wants to see you. That's a point when you go, oh, shit. Excuse me, we'll buzz that out. But now you change your mental thinking of, okay, he's going to give me the Navy Achievement Medal. So change your stinking thinking into positive thinking. So I don't know if that answers the
That's awesome.
question.
So let me tell you what they mean to me. So the first one, know what you don't know. I was 16 years old when I realized my father was not a genius. I would ask him a question at dinner and he'd say, we'll talk about it tomorrow night. And I was just so happy to have an engaged parents. It was my father, mother, and myself. And the next night we'd sit down and my father would start the conversation with what I had asked him yesterday. And I thought my dad was the smartest man in the world. What he would do in that 24 hours is go to his network of contacts and find the answer. So while he's building up his network, they're building him up. But at the same time, I don't answer questions I don't know the answer to. I'll take the time to find the answer, and I'll surround myself with people whose knowledge complements mine. When we talk about you own your name, it's what you talked, it's reputation. It's who am I? I grew up, I seriously thought my name was Tony Seminara's daughter. It wasn't Cheryl. I was Tony Seminara's daughter. And that came with a lot of responsibility and it came with a lot of privilege. And so I learned to respect that. And I learned that integrity is the most important thing in my life. I learned the hard way not to compromise my integrity. What's interesting is when I was living in Columbia, South Carolina, and I was the chair of the Information Technology Council, and we had our first Black Tie Awards dinner, and my dad and my stepmom flew down, and he had the president of Bell South, the president of South Carolina Electric and Gas, all these big executives going over to him and saying, "Are you Cheryl's dad?" So just the whole circle had turned. When the employee comes in, put the pencil down is exactly what it means. I had a young lady who worked for me one time, and she had been a good employee, but she had started faltering. She was coming in late. Her work wasn't up to par, silly mistakes. And I had a conversation with her. I had to do a verbal documented warning. And at this point now, I'm getting ready to tell her, this is your 90-day warning. And she walked into the room, and it was the first time I actually looked at her and made eye contact. And the only way to describe it is the light was gone from her eyes. So I took that written warning and I put it in a drawer and I asked her, "Tell me what's going on." And she tells me she's late on Tuesdays and Thursdays because those are the days her mom has chemo. And with her being the sole caretaker for her mom, her attention's elsewhere. So instead of firing the girl, I allowed her to telework on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We took one project that wasn't a priority and just tabled it. She was at the point that she had written the report. It needed to be edited, revised. Great, let's have this person do that. And you always talked about cross-training Sally on what you do. So this is a good time for her to work with you in this other project. And in 30 days, she became my best employee.
Yeah, I want to interject there that's also correlates with management by walk around. And of course, if you're a senior officer on board a ship walking around and communicating with the crew, it's just like your children. You can go, as soon as you see them, you can go, okay, something's different today. Come talk to me. So I think it's very important. And that's the challenge in today's post-pandemic world of, remote workforce and that. How do you make that connection? I don't have the answer to that, but there's got to be more than Zoom meetings or Google Teams or Google Meets, but you've got to somehow connect with people on frequent enough basis that when something's not up.
Yeah. And, something else about Zoom meetings, as I coach clients, a lot of us have two screens, right? So we might be looking at this screen, but our camera's on this screen. So I tell them, make sure you let people know, if you see me looking to the side, it's because I have a second screen. Or folks, I'm going to be taking notes. So if I look down, I'm taking notes. It's just a simple matter. Yeah, there you go. Simple matter of respect, right?
Right.
Fourth one, know who signs the checks. So I best illustrate this. When I worked at FEMA, I translated this to know who processes your travel vouchers. I was deployed to Hurricane Sandy. There were 8,000 of us deployed. So every week, the travel department was processing 4,000 travel vouchers. This was my first disaster back in 2012. So I go into the travel office and I say, okay, guys, this is my first disaster. Help me understand what you need from me so you can do your job. And they were blown away. And so as I was doing that, I made sure that I got them everything they needed. So for me, it's about understanding what those around you need to do the job, because they may not be the person that actually signs the checks, but if they don't do their job, you're not getting your check. And then the last one, when the front office calls, this is a good lesson in leading up. So I look at this as, if you let them know, I've heard you. I'm working on this project till 4:00. Do you need it before then? And, a lot of times like, oh, that's fine. It's not that big of a priority. So understanding how to, there are times that we have to drop everything we do, right? When I worked at DHS headquarters, if the secretary's office is calling, something was going to stop and a new project was going to start. But if it was just something that wasn't as important, I've heard you. Because what happens is, if I'm teaching a class and the chief human capital officer sends me an email and I don't let him know I heard, now he's going to get up from his chair. He's going to walk around the building. He's going to try to find me. He's going to ask everybody. He's going to spend 20 minutes to find out I'm teaching, even though it was on the calendar. But it's all about just managing those expectations and letting them know they've been heard and that what they're asking you to do is a priority, but it may not be the most important priority. Right.
And so that goes into the modern world. On a future podcast, I'm going to have Dr. Sanford Ehrlich, a professor emeritus from University of San Diego. And he always says, return every phone call quickly. Mm-hmm. And even if you keep it brief, but again, that goes to, I got your call, I got your voicemail, I heard you, let's schedule something or get back to it. And okay, my kids that are listening, when I text you, come on, just text me back that you got it. I'll tell you, parents want to hear back.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I'm 58 years old. My dad doesn't hear from me every 2 days. He picks up the phone and hunts me down.
Right. And I mean, you don't have to have, in business, you don't have to have the complete answer to at least say, okay, I got your message. I got your call. And I'm working on that project. Let me update you here. But yeah, letting people know so that it also clears their mind so they can go on to their next item on the to-do list. So
what are your life lessons?
Oh gosh. Well, I have learned that where I started is not where I ended up, in that it's hard to not talk about in life lessons, not just in the profession, but also in relationships. And that is, I think, the life lesson I've learned over and over again is that you can never stop learning. You can never stop working on yourself and improving your behavior, your understanding, like understanding these tips. And I think in my marriage, I'm always working on that. You never get to the point going, okay, I've got it now. I've got it down. I've got this wired. No, I always need to work on tone, and communications and things of that nature, and that life changes. And so you need to flow with that. Also, I learned that whatever your faith is extremely important because it gives you that solid foundation. And many people, as I recently listened to a Catholic bishop talking about, the secular world has put so much, pushed faith away and tried to substitute job, entertainment, food, drugs, music, whatever it is, relationships, and they haven't found true happiness. And so I feel that having a foundation of faith is going to help you as a leader. I think elite leaders have foundation of faith, whatever that faith may be. And then finally, this one I learned the hard way, and that is you've got humility. Being a humble individual kind of goes with your 5 points. You can weave it in there. And humility and being humble has nothing to do with weakness or, weakness or meekness. Humility just knows understanding yourself, listening to others, and not having to be verbally the number one or what have you. Your competence will shine through. So, and in my book, the life lessons I share are along those lines of faith and humility, but also, having passion in anything. And that's a passion is a desire, and you can't lead if you don't desire to be the leader. And then accountability, which I think goes to your own name. Accountability goes to understanding your profession and what's required to do it, understanding your relationships and being accountable for your own actions. And then commitment, being committed is almost like a Denny's breakfast. There's scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. Well, the baker was involved in providing the toast. The chicken was involved in providing the eggs. The farmer was involved in providing the hash browns, but only the pig is committed. So in commitment, be the pig in your breakfast. And then, of course, traits and traditions, developing traditions in your family life, in your work life, and looking at the traits of other leaders you admire or don't admire. So I think you can learn from both types of leaders, good leaders and other leaders, because you'll go, okay, I want to emulate that individual. I do not want to follow the path of this other individual.
I think a lot of times we remember the lessons learned so much from the less effective leaders, those bad leaders, and we remember what we don't want to be, but we never think about what we want to be.
Right.
And I
right.
think that's why mentors and having positive role models in your life is so important. And really, one of the things I ask my coaching clients is as they sit and they get to a point that they're struggling, and I say to them, okay, so think about the movie of your life. Who plays you? And I had one of my clients one day come back to me and say, the invisible man, because I never feel heard. My family doesn't listen. I'll say things and they'll just run right over me, or I'll share my thoughts and they're just dismissed. And that was a turning point for that person. So it's, who do you want to be? How do you want to be remembered? And I think that's what the part we forget about, because we just focus on what we don't want to be.
Right. And it's hard to understand that that's not a your problem. That's their problem if they're not listening to you. So, so you'll have to, I think, work on that and go, ask people, I need you to hear me. Mm-hmm. I don't think you're hearing what I'm saying to you. So, remaining calm is important in that process and not turn it into arguments. So, all right. So, did I give you some life lessons there?
They were amazing. Thank you.
So, but as this one counselor I had that said, Gary, being humble isn't you going, hey, it's me, I'm humble. So, working on that, is an everyday, process of, putting others first, being considerate, but I think the most important thing is right now in today's technology intense world is being mentally present when you're physically present. And so that means when your partner or friend says something to you, put down the phone, put down the tablet, look them in the eye and listen.
Yeah, I had a boss one time who would just be sitting back in his chair typing the entire time. And, people would meet with him and they were enabling it, right? And so I would go in and I would wait a couple seconds. He says, Are we meeting? And I said, well, obviously we're not. Or, you know what? This looks like a really bad time. Let me come back. And I would leave. And everybody's like, oh my God, you just left the room? And I'm like, my time is valuable. And it was funny because it got to the point that I would go in and he would stop what he was doing. And so it became this, I'm not going to enable you. I'm going to let you know that my time is valuable. And so a lot of the folks that I coach that are junior employees or early executives just starting out or first-time managers, it's how to lead up. Because if you don't tolerate that and you do it professionally and with respect, you're leading your manager. You don't have to have a title to be a leader.
Right. Exactly. And you're teaching people how to treat you. Your behavior teaches others how to treat you. And also, you don't have to have a title to be a leader. If there are two people in a work environment together, there's a leadership opportunity. Mm-hmm. And you can lead by just your example, it's amazing when I was captain of a ship and roles like that, where I would meet with parents, they would always say, well, tell me how can my child, Sailor Jimmy, be successful in your ship? And I would always say, well, one, show up on time, rested and ready to go, meaning don't play Xbox or Nintendo until 3:00 in the morning and then show up tired and not ready to go. And I said, be clean in mind, body, and uniform. One, nobody likes to work with somebody that's stinky, and, be proud of your work apparel and dress appropriately. And then don't have, being clean of mind means, have positive thoughts, good thoughts. I remember one time when we were pulling into port, I was on the bridge wing as we're moving up against the pier, and I heard a sailor walking down the flight deck yelling, I can't wait to get ashore and get just total drunk. And so I blew my whistle, called him up to the bridge. I said, that's not a good way to think. But also, do your work with a smile on your face and do a little bit more than is expected, and you'll do great. So show up on time, rested, ready to go, be of clean of body, mind, and uniform, do everything with a smile, do more than is expected, and lead by your example.
That's
and you'll
great
be successful. You'll be, and it applies to anyone. So anyway, I got a job after retiring from the Navy, and I was working at Walmart as a greeter, and I kept coming in 15 minutes late. And the manager finally came over and said, I know you're a Navy man. What did they say when you came into work late every day? I said, they would say, good morning, Admiral. How would you like your coffee today? Thank you very much.
I love that you have a laugh track. Yeah, it's interesting when you think about the infrastructure of the military, right? By nature of your role and your rank, you have very much positional power. But when I did one of my master's theses, I interviewed folks that served with a young lieutenant named Colin Powell in Vietnam. And they told me the difference between Colin Powell and every other young lieutenant in Vietnam was you wanted to follow Colin Powell. And I could see that in you. I mean, I wanted to be around you because you weren't just the admiral. You were somebody that always had time to talk to, whether it was the students at NDU or me as an educational partner. And it really makes a difference. It makes it seem like leaders are that much more approachable. So if the CEO is walking through the ranks, a lot of people are afraid to talk to that person. And right. So, it's understanding, what's the old saying? They put their pants on one leg at a time.
Yeah. I used to say that too. I put my pants on one leg at a time, but when I have my pants on, I command 32 ships and 16,000 sailors. What do you do?
Yeah.
No, but I think you're right. I mean, somebody once said, why after a ceremony do you always go up and talk to the band? And I said, because it costs nothing. It takes a couple of minutes, and those sailors will now be motivated to tell their family, oh, after we played at this ceremony, the Admiral came up and said, great job. So, that's just one example, but it doesn't take any time to stop and listen to somebody and know, you still have to know your own boundaries that, a young employee or a young sailor may have some sort of complaint. Well, your job is to maybe listen, but not to solve that problem, because his leading petty officer or chief petty officer needs to solve that problem. So, you have to know your own boundaries, but that doesn't mean you can be a jerk. And that's the summary of another admiral who's written a book on leadership. And she goes, you can summarize it in this phrase: don't be a jerk.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes back to, how do you want to be remembered? What's your legacy? You own your name. And so for me, that's the one lesson that stands out, I think, more than everything else. Because if you own your name and you're that responsible person and you treat people with respect, all those other things will fall in line.
Right. Exactly. So, all right, we look forward to your upcoming book, and hopefully listeners look forward to my upcoming book, soon to be a minor motion picture, Navigating Leadership, Making a Pact with with Excellence. And we're going to follow up with Navigating Marriage, and then maybe Navigating Parenting, and then maybe Navigating Faith. So then
I think Navigating Education.
There we go. You will be
you can co-write that one.
A collaborator on Navigating Education. So, that is awesome. That is awesome. Wait until my publisher hears that. Okay. So, all right, Cheryl, do you want to summarize what anything, especially changing the culture of leadership, one leader at a time?
Thank you, Gary. It's so important to understand that we all talk about the impact one person can have. And so think about that one stone you throw in the pond and the ripple effect it has. If you can be that one leader and you're focusing on you being that good leader, it'll make a huge difference. And it's not, again, you don't have to be in that position of power. It's all about being that good human and really understanding you and what makes you you, so that you can have that positive impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love, my mother had a stained glass, plastic stained glass thing hanging from her bulletin board. And I love this phrase, and I've used it often. And that is, any man can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in a seed. And as a leader, you're going out there planting seeds, and you have no idea the breadth and depth of influence you're having, because you don't know how many apples are going to come out of those seeds of leadership. So again, Cheryl Seminara, PhD, grateful daughter for the 5 lessons her father has taught her, and an educator, and she certainly is changing the culture of leadership, one leader at a time. Thank you very much, Cheryl.
Thank you.
And again, I want to thank you as the host of the Admiral's Almanac. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to send me a voicemail, you can do that at www.admiralsalmanac.com. Look for the little microphone in the lower right-hand corner, and you can send me a voice message, and that may show up on a future podcast. So again, thank you very much, and look forward to my upcoming book, Navigating Leadership, Making a Pact with Excellence. Thank you very much. Until we see again, let's wishing you a happy voyage home.